Let us know. Morgane, I can hear you and I can see you. Are you connected through on your side?
Perfect. And now I'm going to try to share my screen. Hopefully it works.
Fingers crossed on that.
Let's see.
I can see answers coming in on the poll now. It looks as if venue experience and being in new places is taking the lead also with the face-to-face meeting.
Yes.
As we are all working from home, obviously, our day-to-days can become very stagnant and boring, and you should always be looking to get out of the house. Everybody, make sure you are giving your eyes a rest. Make sure you are looking after your mental health as we find ourselves stuck inside. Fingers crossed we'll be back with physical conferences next year, and we look forward to welcoming you all to that. Morgane, it is connected. I can see it. So
amazing.
If you are ready, everybody, please do drop a hello and a welcome and a round of applause into the general chat. Morgane, welcome to another FinTech Design Summit. It's always a pleasure to work with you. I will disappear off the stage now. Best of luck. Over to you. And we will be here in the background if there's any problems as well for the
yeah. All right, cool. Let's start. Hi, everyone. I'm Morgane Peng, and super excited to be talking at this FinTech Design Summit today. And we are going to talk about complexity and dealing with complexity in a daily job as UX practitioners. And first, I'd like to ask everyone to think about how we pitch our job as UX designers, because I had to ask this question a lot around me when I set up the team at Societe Generale, and it's a 150-year-old company, financial group. And in the division where I work, which is the corporate and investment banking division, a lot of people were not familiar with design, user-centered design, and all those happy acronyms. And let's face it, when you Google user experience, one of the first results you get is this. And it doesn't help at all. I mean, if anything, it confuses people even more, especially those who spend their entire career with others, and they were fine with others before. So very often, one of what we try to do and what we tend to do is say things like this. Oh, I make horrible tools easier. And I'm super guilty of those mental shortcuts as well. And I've said that a lot at the beginning of my career. But my question really is our mission to simplify everything. And from whose point of view? I could be tempted to go around on the trading floors, and when I see all those screens with numbers, buttons, I could be tempted to try to simplify everything. Like this, a single click button. Amazing, right? I know that in reality, it's not that extreme. But we do say things, or I've heard people say things that, it was too cluttered. Yeah, it was looking nice, not really nice, so I removed it from my design. But the thing is, trading and a lot of time in FinTech, what we have to do is not like playing Candy Crush. And there's a big risk of oversimplifying our design. And what I mean by that is at the end of the day, we may be creating a black box for our users. And that's for any complex industries. Finance, of course, healthcare, I would say anything that is business to business or that is used by employees. And what really worries me is a trend I've seen recently when I interview candidates, because part of our process is a design test that we do with them during the session. And very often, more and more, people jump straight into the test and just assume that what we're actually asking them is to simplify whatever screen we're showing them. And they will also comment, wow, it's so cluttered. I will never be able to use this. But that's not the point. They will never use those screens. I mean, unless they try to change the job and become financial advisors. So that's the genesis of this talk. As Hali said, the founder of the Ueno agency, design is visualized thinking. But it seems that many designers aren't thinking of much of anything these days. So sometimes, yes, we have to simplify, and sometimes we don't. And to come back to my candidates, I can't really hold it against them, because it's true that many bootcamps today, they don't have time to onboard their students on complex topics like healthcare, finance, etc. And let's face it, we'll all prefer having shiny Spotify or Deliveroo designs for portfolio than boring great tables of data. And maybe it's just harder as well to define what is good design for expert users. So yes, this is the genesis of the talk today. And it started as something we would share with our new joiners in the team. And I'm very excited to be sharing it with the wider world today. So the topics I'd like to cover today are the following. First, we'll get familiar with designing for professional users with concrete examples. Then I will share a concept to help you analyze when you should be stopping simplifying your design. And final topic, if you happen to be designing in the amazing world of complexity, well, what can you do to survive as a designer or design practitioners? So let's move to the first part, design comparisons. In our everyday life, I am pretty sure everyone is using apps for their personal needs, like ordering food, listening to music. But really, they're just the tip of the iceberg of very complex systems below. Everything that happens behind the scene. And the people who work behind the scene, they use something completely different. And we don't really get to see this advanced version very often, unless we're part of this small, intimate circle. And I tried, when I was building this talk, to ask for examples from my connections in healthcare and aerospace. But every time what they said to me is, I can't share it. It's confidential. And you may see some designs on portfolios, but again, I'm not very sure if this is approved or not, because most of the time we don't have clearance to show our designs. And to be honest, companies, they don't really have an interest of showing them either, because most of the time it's for specific users. They have confidential information, like competitive advantage, or even just showing the internal organization. But I still managed to find some relevant examples. And I'm happy to say that we have the clearance at Societe Generale to share some of our work, so I'll do it. Let's start easy. This one, I think everyone knows this search engine. But have you ever wondered what's on the other hand for the professionals? You may have seen screens from Google Ads. As you can see, it's much more compact, there's smaller fonts. We could say that it's kind of boring, like just tables with data. But that represents 82% of the revenues of Google in Q4 last year. And it's always between 70 to 80%. So that is representing the main source of revenues for Google. Let's move on to this one, the Eurostar, which is a booking. It's a train company. For example, here I'm trying to go from London to Paris. And like every good booking system today, it's step by step. I can see everything laid out pretty clearly in big. But now my question is, what about travel agents who have to book tickets all day long? Do we think they're using this? I was very happy to see that. So it was at the Design System London conference, and Sue Under shared a bit of what is happening behind the scenes. And you can see this is actually what the Eurostar employees use. And everything is much more compact. They have all the combinations of currencies, dates. They can see seat availabilities all in one screen. Final example from my company. So far, we've seen examples of, business to consumer and business to business interfaces. Well, sometimes, even in business to business, we have different types of interfaces. And the one you're currently seeing is something we give to small and medium enterprises in France to manage their foreign exchange needs. Everything is kept simple, step by step, etc. And here again, do you really think that all internal sales and traders would want to use something like this? Or even treasurers from very large companies, they use something like this. And again, here, you have to be licensed to actually use this one because, as you can see, there's a lot going on the screen. People have to follow multiple currencies at the same time. They have to deal with advanced financial instruments. And here, our promise is a bit different. What we really want them to be able to do is stay in the flow, do their work, be professionals. So really, when we, designers, or people from the outside world, look at those screens, we may be thinking, oh, it's complex and complicated, difficult to use. But for professionals, it's actually complex, but easy to use. And it's very funny because last week we had a client feedback on something similar to the last example I shared. So very complex screens with a lot of data. And what they said is, oh, we didn't ask any question on the interface because everything was very natural. They used the word natural, which is, not something I would expect actually. So to wrap up on this session, business professionals and employees, they don't need to be spoon-fed. Their job is actually to know how their work works. And that means that the simplest design is not always the most efficient. When we designers are oversimplifying things, we are actually making it harder for people to use our products. And this is my second part. How do we do and when do we stop oversimplifying? So the idea is not to go back to when everything was a mess in the interface. I'd like to introduce a concept that can help understand how we can reach the right balance. And I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Yes, Mike, you're right. Friction can be good. I'm going to talk about this just in a sec. And same for checks. So this theory is actually from a financial theory on portfolio management. And after working many years in complex design, I realized that we can actually reuse this, but for us as designers, to design considering business expertise and interface expertise. So I'd like first to define those words. Business expertise. It's a person's knowledge in an area or topic to their studies, business training, or work experience. For example, when you start a job in your career, you're just trying to understand what's going on around you. But then in a few years, what you actually want is actually be efficient, stay in the flow. And this also includes the mental model of how people approach their tasks and the processes at work. I saw one day this tweet from Jordan from a colleague, and he gets asked to reproduce Excel so much that he made a meme out of it. And it's true that people in finance, they just assume, they love Excel, and they just assume that every feature should allow them to manipulate data as efficiently as in Excel. And that can give nightmares to my designers. And I guess for designers in FinTech in general. The second axis is the interface expertise. It's a person's knowledge of how an interface works due to their habit of using it, or training, or maybe because they used something similar in the past. So for example, if you used once, I think, a food delivery app, you know roughly how to use all of them. And now if we plot the two together, we get something like this. So for people who don't like charts, don't run away, we're gonna go through this together. For now, I just want to point out that any design above the curve is overcomplicated. You're making it harder for your users to use the service. But any design, so any combination below the curve, is oversimplified. you are actually destroying value and you're putting them at risk of not being able to do the work. And the curve is actually the sweet spot in the middle. It represents the UX efficient frontier. And ideally, that's where you want to be on the curve. Let's have a closer look. Low everything. I think this is where most products with large consumer base are, getting food delivered, listening to music when you're not from the food or from the music industry. Then here in this combination, that's where we have a lot of legacy tools. They were made very for complex business, but not so much, but they are super complicated in their interface. That's actually where my team's playground is, because we're trying to get closer to the curve and we're trying to design the best experience, taking into account users' business complexity. Last one, and for me, is the danger zone. It's here because the interface has been dumbed down too much. And for me, that's the greatest danger for designers who get thrown into complex projects and who cannot access to users or who cannot do user research, because we have responsibilities. And I have to be very serious for a moment here, because I heard and I know there's some jokes around us. Oh, I'm just a designer, don't ask me. Oh, it's not like if we're saving lives here. But we have responsibilities, and design issues, they can have serious consequences in the physical world, but also in the digital world. People can get hurt, they can make mistakes, and they can lose their job or worse. The next bit can be a bit triggering for people, so I just wanted to mention this ahead. You may have heard of the Robin Hood tragedy, where a young investor ended his life because he thought he was deep in debt. And part of the accusations are around the app, that it was dumbed down too much, it was making feel like, option trading is like a game like Candy Crush. And I really like this analysis from Kara Swisher at the New York Times. And essentially what she's saying is spot on. We have responsibility in our design about friction because we're impacting real people here. And this is serious. And sometimes, we can look fancy, have designer glasses, etc. But still, it's a serious business. So for me, my only wish, if you have to remember one thing from my talk today, is this. Am I giving the right amount of complexity to the right people? Am I keeping enough frictions where it needs to be? That's also our role as designers, to say, hey, maybe here we need some friction. And when my product owners are influenced too much because they spend too much time on Dribble, they've been looking at Medium articles from startups, blah, 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 and now they're suddenly asking for wow effects, sexy designs, etc. Well, when they do this, I ask them to think where they should be on the frontier. And we sometimes do this exercise as well internally. For example, from the two interfaces I've introduced earlier, that's how we map them on the curve. On one bit, you can see the low end of the curve. That's where we have our simple interface. And that is usually given to people with simple needs. And those people cannot access the more advanced interface. And as you can see, it's actually a range, because even for this most advanced interface, we actually have different configuration, so that we are making sure that we give the right amount of complexity to the right people. Even if behind, it's actually the same backends and the same APIs. But that is super, super important. To wrap up on this topic, depending on your audience, and especially in B2B or when you're designing for employees, your job as a designer is to find the sweet spot between the not too simple and the not too complicated. All right, final part. I got a few minutes left here, and a lot could be said on this topic. So I've selected the 3 things that I think help us the most and help the most the team at Societe Generale, and that's according to me. But I think that doing them should set you towards the right direction, especially if you work in fintech or if you have to deal with a lot of data. So what you do if you happen to be designing with all this complexity? Well, first, start outside of design tools. What I mean by that is, if you Google design or design thinking, usually what we get is the usual sticky notes or people brainstormings or people drawing out wireframes. But remember here, we are the designers who need to make sense of complex elements. So first, we need to identify the mess. And as A.B. Covert said in her book, How to Make Sense of Any Mess, there's actually not a lot of causes for confusing information. Either you have too much of it, not enough of it, or maybe it's not what you need, or a combination of all of these. Well, I would build on this and mention that actually there's 3 dimensions, because there's the users, there's you, and your project members. In reality, that's the 3 components we have on a project. And for us, the best way we found to deal with this multi-dimension mess is to actually start in spreadsheets. The idea here is to list all your data with real examples, that is super important, in a spreadsheet. And doing this ahead allows you many things. First, if you're confused, you can, just search on your side ahead of the workshops. Also, and that happens a lot, project members sometimes, they don't even use the same language for the same thing. So, for example, usually some people may say notional, but also nominal, or even amount. And I think there's a 4th term, I don't remember, but for the same thing. So again, that allows you to align everyone ahead of the design, the proper interface phase. And also, it's a nice way to act officially that, all right, here's the list of data we think that we users need that makes the most sense for them. And you know what? You can actually user test this list. You don't have to wait till, they're finally in the high fidelity mode. You can already start testing it right away. Second point is, it's okay not to follow the rules sometimes. And I would say, especially if you've seen them on Medium, LinkedIn, or Twitter. What I mean by that is, I see those shared so much. Honestly, I wanted to keep some stats, but I stopped. Yeah, it's true. We talk about all the UX laws, the golden rules for form designs, etc. And it's true that when you see people talking like this, which is how sales and traders speak to each other on the trading floor, the first thing you want to do is, okay, let me break it down and it'd be better for the users. But that's actually your mental model. It's not their mental model. And when we talk about experts, actually, it's not so much different than, our developers. So here, what you can see on screen is some properties they have to set for CSS animation. And you can see that's just a bunch of things that they know by heart because it's their work. And since we're talking about experts, we are also experts of our design software. I mean, could you imagine if someone was to oversimplify your tools, let's say Photoshop? Let's say if someone did something like this, step by step, progressive disclosure. I think here I followed all the rules I could find on Medium, and I think I ticked them all. But honestly, it's not great. I'm sure designers wouldn't use this tool or they will complain. So don't do that to your users. Don't do that to other experts. Last point, it's dangerous to go alone, so don't. I don't know if there's any video nerds game here. Video game nerds, sorry, right order here. You may have recognized The Legend of Zelda. And it's true that often we designers are a bit full of ourselves. We are thinking we're the hero of our journey, and the others, they just don't get design, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, when you're dealing with a great amount of complexity, you can't be successful alone. And you have to deal with people, and you have to be here with them together. This essentially was my talk last year for UX Live. It was on how to deal with people who don't get design. I put the link, and I will share the slides as well if you want to have a look. Essentially, my talk was about changing this mindset of us versus them to us versus failure or drama or, everything that can go bad on project. And this takes time, changing mindset. We're operating with people here. It's taking time, it's difficult, but it's really worth doing it. And I know it's a hassle, but ultimately these people will become your champions. And when there's trust, something quite interesting happens is you can actually share your work with them. For example, we realized that our business analysts, they're actually super great at doing user research. Before, they were mapping a lot of diagram flows, technical flows, while we can train them to do user flows. And today we actually, when we know that the project is mature, that's how we share. That's what we do. And I want to finish this section by celebrating real people for whom we've achieved this. And that wasn't easy. The quote at the top is a real one. And to me, that's one of the biggest collaboration success we had this year. Because before, they were seeing us as being the bottleneck and acting like the police. And we were seeing them as going rogue because they were bypassing the methodology. They were not even using the design system, etc. So what we did is we put in place what we called an experience league to share our design strategy on a regular basis. And they are non-designers. And today, the league actually coordinates all the new requests with us. And they help so much because they understand the complexity of the industry and they understand the complexity of the system. So when they say something, we can actually trust that actually they actually do know more than us on those kind of complex topics. So as a final wrap up, well, one, don't spoon feed your professional and employee users because they know their work. Two, you can actually use now the UX efficient frontier to find the right balance between simplifications and complexity. And three, when you have to deal with complexity, well, first, start outside of design tools. Again, it's okay not to follow the rules sometimes, especially if you've seen them on Twitter, LinkedIn, Medium, Dribbble. And it's dangerous to go alone, so don't. As Don Norman said, life is complex, and tools must match life. So more than ever, we designers are needed to tame the complexity of life. If you want to read more stories about the design teams and what we do have a Medium blog. So yeah, have a look. There's some story that might interest you. And the slides will be shared on my Twitter. And if you have any questions, I am super happy to take them now. And merci.
Amazing. Morgane, thank you so much. As I said, it's always a pleasure to accommodate and work with you. A fascinating tool that we should all be conscious of. So we do have time for questions. Currently, there is just one in the Q&A area. So for everybody there, a fantastic opportunity to gain insight here from Morgane. Please do drop some questions into the Q&A area. The first one is from George, and the question is more recruitment focused. But you mentioned the importance of the design task. Do you ever get pushback from experienced designers who do not want to do a design task? And if so, how do you get around this?
Oh, yeah, George, thank you so much for asking this question. I wasn't very clear maybe in my presentation. It's actually a test we do during the interview process. So, for example, first we start with a chat, and usually for the second round, we do the test with them during the session. So it's part of the interview. It's not something that we give to people and give them a week to work, because I completely understand that is a complete ripoff. I mean, that shouldn't be happening. And I think as a bank, if we do that, it's even worse. So no, that's a test that we do during the session with the candidates. And is there anything else on the question? Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it's because we see a lot of comments on LinkedIn about people using design tasks as a part of the recruitment process. But as you mentioned, it's something that they're doing at home that can take days to do, and as a result, it seems like it's a slightly unfair way of doing it. I will move on from that question. Thank you so much, George, there. A question from Anya. She starts off by saying that she really loved your talk, so congratulations there.
Thank you.
What do you think about the role of delight in complex tools? She understands that you covered complexity and simplicity. What is your opinion on personality and character in products that are goal and task orientated?
That's a very interesting question. I would first start, I think, by saying that what I find out is what delights us as consumer is not the same thing, not necessarily the same delight as for my advanced users. Like with the example I shared, when on this very advanced screen, people were like, wow, it's amazing, it feels natural. And they were kind of delighted. It's not delighting to me because it's like full of data and it's like super serious. But I think in the context of people's work, it might be different, and we don't necessarily have to apply our own mental model to what is delight. So I would say here, voice of users is the most important, because by studying them or even having them onboarding into your design process, that's how you will know what is really delightful for them or not.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Anya. A question here from Boya. I hope I pronounced that correctly. What advice would you give for someone to practice designing for B2B products since they are not publicly accessible?
Yeah, that's a big challenge, right? I think that's probably one of the most challenging thing when we have newer designers, because they just assume they can just Google the competition. No, you can't Google the competition. Nothing is public, or it might be public, but on some very obscure publication and reports. I would say it really depends on your organization, because if the organization is well structured, normally you do have design peers and you do have this kind of history of previous projects or knowledge you can build on. So having examples from similar use cases but done elsewhere is probably the most useful thing that you can use. And if not, then that means potentially you have to start from scratch and do a lot of user research.
Thank you for that. Let's go with this question from Olivera. I think I pronounced that correctly. It's a topic that comes up many, many times, regardless of the conference or the event. It always comes up. What is your approach to teaching internal stakeholders the importance of providing feedback?
Feedback from...
So I guess this can be about what's your approach to proving the power of UX and design to stakeholders, especially in banks. We can imagine that as they are kind of legacy institutions, some can be quite slow to realizing the importance of customer-centric design, human-centric design, and what it can bring to the return. So how do you demonstrate or communicate the importance of design, UX, research to the internal stakeholders at the company?
I suppose that it's like every battle, you have to know if it's worth fighting it. What I mean by that is, for example, let's say your project is super late on some kind of regulation topic. I am pretty sure they will not care about design because they're so late on regulation. And if they don't deliver on time, well, it's just very bad. You can get fined. It's not going to go well with the regulators. So in that case, and that happened to us in the past, if there's just no time to talk to users, there's just no time to do things, the design process, because like by that date, we need to deliver this because that's the regulation, then I wouldn't fight this battle because again, there's bigger strengths and forces at play here. If there's a room for discussion, I guess it's such a big topic. We can go on for 1 hour here, but if there's a room for discussion, I guess it really depends what design can bring to them. And there's a nice matrix I've seen. I will try to share it as well, where you can see like it's either bring revenues, reduce cost, bring increase efficiency. So identifying what's important to them might be quite useful here. And if it happens that you have some clear process in place, like for us, you just actually say that it's the process. I mean, the day we started to put in the process that usability testing is compulsory, it was just amazing how people just wouldn't know anymore question if they needed time for usability testing. They were like, it's the process. Okay, let's do it. So if you have your hands on the process, do it. That's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. So that is all we have time for, Morgane. As you said, we could have gone on for much longer. So thank you so much for being a part of the event as always. Thank you to everybody who has joined in with the questions there.
We dance.